Well, Chris, welcome to the Transformational podcast and welcome everyone else who's listening. I'm glad you're with us, Chris.
Oh, yeah. It's good to be here.
Yeah, I see you there in your clean Texas Aggie garb. Is Texas actually, are the Aggies doing anything right now? Is there, I mean,
no, Robert, it's the most disappointing sports year of all time for the Aggies.
Yeah. Do they have a team? I've never seen them on any news channel.
We have a few people in track who are representing well. So for the first time in my life, I'm a major track fan.
Yeah. Well, that's yeah, right. Yeah. You will never be a major track fan. I like that shirt, man. That's pretty, it's pretty clean.
Thanks. It's summer days, so you got to go with that PFG stuff that basically has ventilation and
I don't think it would matter when you sweat. Yeah, I was gonna say I don't think it would matter. I'm still gonna sweat.
Oh, I'm a sweat. It just dries fast when I do sweat. So
yeah, that's why. I just got the old Uncharted shirt on. No fancy shirt, no shirts for you. I know it is tried and true. Got to stay on brand.
I like it. I'm for it.
What are you up to, man? What have you been doing?
Man, it's been a good week, all in all, man. Just running hard and fast at church. We at Grace, we actually started a series called The Battle this last week, where we're looking at spiritual warfare. And man, that's fun. I've been doing a lot of reading, getting ready for that, and man, I just it's just I don't know. We've talked about it on here before, but my eyes just get open to so much that we don't see, that God has given us the ability to see if we'll ask Him to show us, and how important it is, because He does tell us your battle's not against flesh and blood, yet we live our day in and day out as if we are only living in the flesh and blood, the physical realm. And God's going, hey, there's so much more to it. So it's been good. One of the things we did is we kicked off another podcast as supplemental to the series. And so
what's that one about? I mean, what's it called? What's it about?
It's at our website. It's the Grace Fellowship podcast, gf.church. You can find it wherever you
Well, your church's link is in the show notes. So if you're looking to, if you watch his sermons on Sunday, I think breaks it down, kind of what made it to the cutting room floor and didn't necessarily make it to the message.
Yeah, and then we go a little more in depth. But it's if you go to podcast or Apple Podcasts or Spotify or YouTube or Facebook, just search for gf.church and you'll find our podcast. But anyway, it was fun to get to do that. But that just a little extra to the plate. But I enjoy it, and it's been a good week, man. Just getting ready.
No, that's funny.
What's up with you, man?
Well, this week was, I like to say, I actually said at the beginning, I was like, I think we might actually be like return to normal this week. Like almost like.
I was actually laughing about that when you sent out your, just a little prayer.
Hang on. Yeah, we're going to get there.
I literally laughed out loud because I was like, well, Robert said he was turning to normalcy.
Return to normal. Right. That's exactly what was going to happen. Yeah. So anyway, return to normal meant, I ended up spending some time up in the building. And on Friday, especially, is when I spent most of my time in the building. There was a lot of angst about one of the things that we've been working on perpetually, and super high level was asking some questions. And so we were in the Navy, so we were trying to answer those questions to the Navy folks. And I did something this week that was what I would call different. You know how I joke and say, hey, Christians don't have to do their job the same way as everyone. Like we don't have to do the same thing as everyone. Right. And there's I guess you could say a script for that. And there's certain lanes that you stay in, you don't go over, etc. Well, anyway, a person that I have a friendship with, but who's pretty high in the Navy, was going to be testifying on Capitol Hill as part of his job. And it's a year thing. And so as I was running, Lord was like, hey, I want you to send him a text message and tell him you're praying for him. And I was like, Lord, yes, I could, because I had his cell phone number from previous job. And I was like, but he's in my chain of command and he's much higher in my chain of command. And that's a little bit of a jump kind of thing. So I was like, I don't know. And and he said, didn't you just say that Christians don't have to, like, didn't you just have a podcast on this? That Christians, and I just finished listening to our podcast, Christians don't have to do it the same way as everyone else. And I'm like, all right, Lord, I guess I'll do that. So it was interesting.
I guess I'll do that. I guess I'll do. Yeah, I'll do what you told me to do.
Yeah, exactly. So I sent him just a quick note, and I said, hey, felt led to pray for you on my run today. Prayed for favor, wisdom, clarity of thought, perfect recollection, and a peace that passes understanding. I said, no need to reply. I wanted you to know that God's thinking about you. And he exchanged a nice text message with me. What I didn't know when I sent that text message is that I would be talking to him on Friday.
There you go.
Yeah. It was interesting. And then Friday was interesting. And we went and talked about some stuff. And what the Lord had showed me, the reason why I sent you all that text message on Friday, say, hey, I need you to pray for me. I'm going to go basically relitigate something that I feel like I've been relitigating for like the last 9 months. And we always come to the same conclusion, but we always start in the same position, starting point with what if, but we always, Chris, I've answered the same question so many times that, like, when he asked the question and he made the same statement as everybody's made before, it was one of those moments where my heart sank a little bit, because I was like, you gotta be kidding me. Like, we're still answering this question?
Yeah.
Like, the answer hasn't changed. Like, there's nothing on the planet that's going to change the answer to this question. You can say the same thing and it doesn't change the answer. So I walked him through that. But you remember what the prayer request I sent you guys was when I said, hey, pray for me? You remember what I asked you to pray for?
I mean, I can look it up.
I think I said, pray for favor, insight, and wisdom.
Yeah. So here's what happens when I get prayer requests like that. I say, all right, Lord, that is my prayer. Will you give him those things out? Literally, I pray right then. God, do this right there. So I say that just so as other people get prayer requests, it's an easy way. You just read it right back to God. And God, this is what I'm praying for.
And I think it's important. Like when I send Chris and the family a prayer request, so I send it to the fam, typically my kind of tight circle. I say, hey, I need you to pray for me. I don't give them just pray for me, ... I give them pray for me, and then I try to give them 3 things to pray for. Right. So favor, insight, and wisdom. So anyway, I go to this meeting, and the reason I sent that is because of something I read that day. I was in 1 Samuel.
Yeah.
And I was in 1 Samuel chapter 30, and we'll talk more about it. Yeah. So anyway, let's do that. Let's jump into 1 Samuel verse 30, and I'll come back to the story. Maybe we'll tell the story as we go. How about it? Does that sound like a good idea?
Great.
All right. So I sent y'all that text message because of this. I was reading through 1 Samuel, and David has just about to go into battle with the Philistines, but the Philistines were pretty funny. He's marching into battle with the Philistines to fight Saul. And the other Philistine kings, not the one he's been hanging with, other Philistine kings are like, absolutely not. Like,
that's a terrible idea.
Like, you do realize this is the same David that slew Goliath. And this is the same David that the women of Israel sing in their dances. Saul's killed his thousands and David his 10,000s. They're like, what are you doing to this? Is this a king named Achish? They're like, absolutely nothing. Send him back to the town you gave him. Mm-hmm. Yep. And I laughed because they were worried, because they're like, hey, if he fights for us, what would stop him from in the middle of the battle turning on us and helping Saul to win Saul's favor? That's kind of that's their worry. It's a real worry, because they don't say it here in the verse, but as I was reading this, God brought to mind, he brought to mind the time when David killed Goliath. Do you remember the little known kind of like, there's like one little line after he kills Goliath that the Israelites who had joined the Philistines turned on the Philistines and began to kill the Philistines. So in that horde of Philistines that were on the one side getting ready to fight Israel were a bunch of Israelites who traded sides for lack of better words. And in the middle of the battle, when they knew that, they picked the winning team is what they thought.
Yeah, they were bandwagon.
Oh, yeah. They were bandwagon Israelites, right? So when it turned, they all turned on the Philistines and killed them. And so these kings are like, send them back. Like, absolutely not. There was history for this.
Yep.
So David leaves. He leaves mad.
Now
he goes back home.
Here's the other part that I guess they weren't aware of is that the town that he gave David was great and all, but from that town, David was going and raiding other towns and wiping them out, and spent their time back in 1 Samuel 27. It says David and his men spent their time raiding the Geshurites, the Girzites, the Amalekites, people who had lived near Shur towards the land of Egypt since time. David did not leave a person alive in the villages he attacked. He took the sheep, goat, cattle, donkeys, camels, and clothing before returning home to see King Achish. And he'd ask, where did you make your raid today? And he'd say, against the south of Judah. So basically, he had actually been
in the south of Judah.
Yes. But he had not been fighting against the Israelites like he was trying to make it seem.
He was accomplishing the Lord's will.
He was.
Without anybody really knowing it, right? He was taking the promised land. Yeah. It's very fascinating.
Very fascinating. So they didn't know that he was already doing this, but they rejected him and told the king, hey, you got to send him back. You got to send him home.
Get him out of here.
Yep.
Yeah, no, it's awesome. So anyway, 3 days later, this is 1 Samuel 30, verse 1. It says, 3 days later, when David and his men arrived home at their town of Ziklag, they found that the Amalekites had made a raid into the Negev, and Ziklag, they had crushed Ziklag and burned it to the ground. They carried off the women and children of everyone else, but without killing anyone. So they get home, and their home is completely wiped out, and nothing remains. Nobody's family, nobody's kids, nothing. And the men that were with him, they all basically grieve.
Right.
And then they grieve some more, and then they get bitter because they go from grief to anger, and they started talking about stoning David.
Yeah, they got to blame somebody.
And boy, I tell you what, you talk about the tides turning. Of course, it says, David found strength in the Lord, and this is where we pick up in verse 7 here. It says, then he said to Abiathar the priest, bring me the ephod. So Abiathar the priest brought it. Then David asked the Lord, should I chase after this band of raiders? Will I catch them? And the Lord told him, yes, go after them. You will surely recover everything that was taken from you. So then it talks about setting out. All right, pause. We can talk about the rest, and I'm sure you got some other stuff. Go ahead.
Well, even before
this, I want to stop at that point in the
That's a good place to stop, because the other thing I want to add before we get to this next point was so David felt rejected by the Philistines, but it was God's plan, because the Philistines were actually about to set out to kill Saul and his sons, which David would not be okay with. David did not want to kill the Lord's appointed one. And so it was really part of God's plan to say, I'm going to separate David from this group, because as a part of God's plan, he was going to have the enemy get rid of Saul and a couple of his sons. So I wrote that down in my journal as I was reading it, just from the standpoint of sometimes what feels like rejection or disappointment can actually be God working in the background, and you don't even know it, and you're not even going to be able to see it. Maybe till you may not ever be able to see it, but you have to begin to go, listen, for whatever reason, and I don't understand it, for whatever reason, this is the way it worked. I'm seeking God. I'm trusting God. I didn't see it coming. I don't know why, but I trust God in it. And then he goes home, and everything had been raided. And so it felt like it went from bad to worse. Don't you know? I mean, rejection. I know, all this. Right? You get home and you're like, oh gosh, God, what's going on? But then what does he do? He turns to God and says, all right, God, what do you want me to do? Yeah. Like, how do you want me to see this, and how do you want me to respond? Because here's the deal. When we get tired and we feel like we're beat up on, we typically respond and react based on our flesh, rather than going to God and saying, God, all right, how do you want me to respond to this?
Yeah. Well, and that was the thing that got me. So I got to this verse and I'm like, wait, I actually reread this one a couple times. I'm like, so then David asked the Lord, should I chase after this band of raiders? Will I catch them? Should I chase after this band of raiders? Well, what if the Lord said no?
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, I'm like,
yeah, for real.
Like, why did he even stop to ask? Like, I would have been like, all right, let's go. We got to go get them.
Right.
But he didn't. He like, no, hey, bring me the ephod. Let's ask the Lord. Should I chase after this band of raiders? And I'm sitting there thinking to myself, I'm like, what in the world? I'm like, why did he ask at this point? And what's fascinating is I was thinking about it. I was contemplating in the chair at the time. God brought to mind the number of times Saul just didn't.
Well, that was,
or he'd get direction and wouldn't even follow it.
And that was one of the major problems with Saul, is that he rejected God's way, and time and time again chose his own way over God's way. He refused to ask God, seek God.
Because Saul probably saw a few things. He probably saw it on the really hard things, but there's probably a few things where he was like, I got this. I really don't need.
Yeah,
I don't really need help.
And the more success he had or more power he had, the less he leaned into God's power.
Yeah. And that's actually kind of, so now with that as the position, right? I'm driving up to see this guy that I've got a relationship with. And I'm like, should I text the family? Should I not text the family? I'm like, nah, I don't need to text them on this one. Like, this is Betty. This is a friend. I'll be fine. I don't need to text him on this one. And then God was like, hey, you remember when David asked? It was like, he's running me through my quiet time, right?
Yeah.
Holy Spirit says, hey, you remember when David sought the Lord about chasing after the band of raiders? And you were kind of like, why in the world would he do that? It's because he just did it. Like, he did it on everything.
Yeah.
As much as possible. And so anyway, that's why I sent out the text message. And it was funny, Chris, when I got to this meeting, I'm waiting. I accidentally ran into my personal boss and on the way in. So we had a chance to talk and kind of game plan and that part. And then we get into the main office to his boss, which is technically he's filling a role that would be his boss's boss. But anyway, it doesn't matter. Pretty high up. And he comes in, he's like, Timmy, so good to see you. He handshake, da, da, da.
Yeah.
And so remember I had said favor, insight, and wisdom, right? Favor,
right.
Check.
There it is.
Yeah. Right? Favor, check. So we walk in, we sit down, and I'm still trying to understand why we're even having this conversation. Like, why are we here? I'm trying to understand. I'm like, Lord, I need insight on what it is. And he's like, let me just give you guys kind of where I'm starting. Insight. Check.
There it is.
I was like, okay, favor, check, insight, check. Okay.
Yeah.
Wisdom, Lord. I need wisdom.
Yeah.
Because where we're starting, I was like, oh, buddy, we need wisdom in this room. Whether it's me or whether it's my boss or whether it's someone else at the table, we need wisdom in this room because we really do need to help him along faster than what it normally takes is like 60 days to get people to the same conclusion that I've arrived at for the last, 9 months. So, it was funny. It was like the Lord drove it home to me as I was driving away that day. He's like, David sought me because he just did.
Yeah.
That's
just part of his go-to.
And did. Yeah. And so it was funny.
Well, and that's
how that kind of tied into the morning.
Don't you think that's why he was often called a man after God's own heart? Because he sought God with his whole heart?
I think so. I mean, there are other verses, right? That talk about it.
That's what you and I were talking about a minute ago. Is I find it interesting because I wrote on that day that David asked God before most major decisions. That was, when I was reading First Samuel 10, and then
I would say he asked God before major decisions and just decisions that you would think are logical. Like he just asked God.
Yeah, and then if you just fast forward into and that's what I want to get to is that you go forward in your scripture to 2 Samuel 3-ish through 7. Let me find where it says this specifically. But I wrote in my journal, David often asked the Lord what to do. And I just wrote, and it led to his success. And I say that because, like, this is someone who was anointed king right? Actually, right before this, he's anointed king. Everybody's looking to him because of his success. God's given him great success. And yet, what does he do? He continues to go back to God and say, all right, God, what do you want me to do? God, here's this is going on. How do you want me to respond? Rather than responding with the flesh or responding with what seems right or feels right. And I can find where that is later. But bottom line is, if you read the story of David, it says, and he sought God, he asked God, he looked to God. And it makes me think of the passage of trust in the Lord with all your heart, Proverbs 3:5-6. Trust in the Lord with all your heart and do not depend on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him and he'll make your path straight. And the whole idea of trust in the Lord with all your heart and don't depend on your understanding, that's asking God in all the areas. And so Robert, like very specifically the other day, and I guess it's fine for me to say this. Julie was just mentioning that her stomach was stirring again and whatever. Yeah. So, we just need to ask God. Like, is that our response when we have a headache or sickness? Do we ask God or we ask a doctor? Do we what's our first response? God, what do you want me to know about this? When your kids attitude seems incredibly rebellious and there's a tension, do you take a moment instead of responding like, well, I'm dad, I know what to do, right? I know how to handle this strong, discipline, right? Do you take a minute to ask God, what do you want me to know? Like, what do you want me to do with this? Robert, there's been times that I feel like that I have actually thought to do that I felt like God said, you need to calm down. You need to calm down, and you need to have a tender approach, and which is not my bent. My bent is more of fiery football coach approach to all things, and yet God's saying, no, you need a tender approach to this. You need to have a strong, truthful, but gentle hand in this. And it's interesting because it's different in different situations, but it applies to all areas. Like, do you ask God before you make a purchase? Like, we asked God before we bought a lawnmower we needed a lawnmower, but it was like, all right, God, so what does this look like? And how, what can I go get?
I've ever done that. Yeah. I don't think I've ever done that. But I rage purchased my last lawnmower. Let's tell on myself for a second. Okay, I rage purchased. Yeah. So I rage purchased. I had one of those riders. I have 1.5 acres, so I got a lot to mow. And so I had a little, green mower that was old. I'd bought it. I had run it, but I kept having to fix it. And then, this thing fell apart. That thing fell apart. The literal wheel fell off because the axle ate through.
You used it till the wheels fell off, bro.
Dude, I even bought an axle and I put that joker back together.
Oh my gosh.
I had it in the front yard, jacked up with a little floor jack, the whole 9 yards. We look absolute redneck.
Like East Texas all over again,
buddy.
Bro.
I got it all fixed, but then it had a carb problem and it just wouldn't run anymore. And so I was so mad. I'd put so much effort into that thing, and I just went out and I bought the first 0-turn mower I could find.
Oh my gosh, dude. That is so not like you. That's actually pretty funny, dude.
That's how I know I rage purchased.
Yeah.
I did like what I got. I'm actually really happy with what I got, but it was pretty funny. I was like, that's it. I'm getting a 0-turn mower. And I'm doing it right now. And I'm not even, anyway, sorry. Yeah. I did not ask the Lord to purchase a mower. I'm probably should have. I probably wouldn't have rage purchased that mower.
That's funny. Well, and I'm not saying we're good at it all the time. I'm saying, man, this is something that, if you read this, I wrote, David asked the Lord often what to do, and it led to his success. Like, I think that could be success. Like, it could lead to a better marriage. If you're married, if you're frustrated with your marriage, are you asking God, what do you want me to do? I can't think of a better counselor. Right?
I got another example of it here.
Now, here's the deal. If okay, good. But if you ask,
you better do it.
Because here's the thing. The other thing that I've learned is I've asked God before, and I didn't like the answer that I got, and I felt like I kept asking, and God said, I've already told you.
Yep.
I've already told you what to do. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to tell you anything else. Quit. Either do what I told you to do, or quit asking, because I'm not going to keep telling you. And I think that's where a lot of times I struggle, is that I get an answer and it's not the answer I wanted. And I'm like, oh man, I don't really want to do it that way, or I don't really want to humble myself in that way. I don't really want to serve in that way, and I think that's just the reality of it. Also exposes, I think, in ourselves just the flesh and the sin that God is saying, no, I want you to respond this way, because it's not about them in this moment. It's not about this situation. It's what I'm working in you, right?
Yeah, he may be teaching you about something.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it was funny. You mentioned when you talked about your son, it brought to mind a scripture in 2 Samuel chapter 5, and you talked about how
that's probably the one I was looking at earlier.
Yeah, it was talking about that. You were talking about the idea that you didn't approach it the same way every time,
right?
Similar situations, but you didn't like, oh, I did it this way last time, so I'm going to do it this way the same this time. God says chill one time, and then God says, hey, I need you to address this another time. And so basically the setup here is David is king of Israel, and the Philistines are like, all right, we're gonna go attack David because we don't like him. And so the Philistines arrived and spread out across the valley of Rephaim. This is in 2 Samuel 5, verse 18. So David asked the Lord, should I go out to fight the Philistines? Will you hand them over to me? And the Lord replied to David, yes, go ahead. Now, interesting question, right? Because again, the Philistines arrived in the land and spread across the valley of Rephaim. He's asking, should I go fight the Philistines? I don't know that I would have thought you had a choice at this point. I would have been like, right. What do you mean? No, should I fight them?
I fight them? Yeah.
Like, they're here and I need to, we're going to fight. So I don't know.
But Robert, remember a couple weeks ago?
Peace was never an option.
Yeah. Remember a couple weeks ago when we were talking about Joshua, and before they went to Jericho, he sought God. God said, here's the battle plan. When they went to Ai, he didn't seek God.
Yeah.
And it was one of those deals of, obviously Ai's next, but he's like, what would have happened if he'd stopped before he went to Ai and say, all right, God, what's our battle plan?
May not have moved out. That's right.
They may not have moved out because God may have said, hey, no, y'all aren't ready yet. Your heart's not ready. There's sin in the camp. There's something you've got to deal with first. So I'd look at this and go, see, this, while it looks like it's obvious, I think it's wise to say, because God's going, no. Or I'm ready.
And this one he says, yes, go ahead. I'll hand them over to you. And you're right. I love this. So David beats them, repels them. And then he says, but after a while, the Philistines return. I take after a while is like maybe a year or something. I don't know. I'm making it up. It doesn't give us any timing on that.
Yeah.
But they return and they spread across the valley of Rephaim. Again, apparently they didn't have enough of a butt whooping the first time.
Yeah.
And
that's also a great picture of what sin happens in our lives. We attack it with God's strength, then we ignore it long enough and allow it to creep back in, and got to readdress it. Anyway, just saying.
No, I know. That's a little bit like, we call that a side journey. Well, that's side quest.
Yeah.
Anyway, so again, David asked the Lord what to do. And so I like this. It's kind of like, should I go fight the Philistines? It doesn't put that in there. It just says, again, he asked him what to do.
Yeah.
And God says, do not attack them straight on. The Lord replied, instead, circle around behind and attack them near the poplar trees. When you hear the sound like marching feet in the tops of the poplar trees, be on the alert. That will be the signal that the Lord is moving ahead of you to strike down the Philistine army. So David did what the Lord commanded, and he struck down the Philistines from Gibeon to Gezer.
You know what's really cool is that everybody loved those trees. They were so popular.
So 2 things about that joke. I didn't know where it was going to land, but I knew you were joking.
Oh, man.
Oh, my goodness, Chris. That was funny.
That wasn't planned. It just fell out right there. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, that's well played, man. So he has the same situation, right? He has the same situation, and he did it in 2 different directions. God didn't give him, hey, go ahead and go out. Now, God could have absolutely just gone out before him and slayed him in the same way he did the last time. But this time he's like, hey, I want you to go around behind him. And then there's this other piece. So he does, and then he defeats them. But there's this other piece that you mentioned at the very beginning on the podcast when you talk about spiritual battle. right? You get an insight, you get a picture into the spiritual battle aspect of what David's facing.
Yeah.
This isn't just a fight against the Philistines.
No, it's a spiritual battle. Battle's not flesh and blood.
That's right. Because when you hear a sound like marching feet in the tops of the poplar trees, be on the alert. That will be the signal that the Lord is moving ahead of you to strike down the Philistine army. Think about that one for a second.
What does that sound like, man?
Oh, buddy.
Golly, you start hearing not the sound of wind in the trees, but the sound of boots marching on the ground. Come on, man.
Tops of the poplars. Be on the alert. Yeah.
Gosh, that would make the hairs stand up on the back. It's
making my hair stand up right now. I'll tell you what. Yeah. So the Lord, he sought the Lord, and the Lord gave him two different ways. The Lord went before him in both ways. And in one way, he even connected, I think, not just for David, but for the men that David was following, he connected the spiritual and the physical.
Right. Yep.
And so we have the same thing, right? We have the same thing where we fight not against flesh and blood. We fight against the rulers, powers, principalities of this world. And a part of doing that is seeking the Lord.
Yeah. Yeah. It's to me, I love that passage. Love that story. Once again, the Lord defeats him. It says, so David did what the Lord commanded, and he struck down the Philistines all the way from Gibeon to Gezer. He pushed them way back. I mean, but he didn't do it his way. He did it God's way. He was willing to, circle around to the back, which I find that interesting. Just the idea of God's got a strategy.
He does.
And his strategy may not, if you think about it, it would have been probably more direct, easier for them to just attack them straight on like they did the first time, right?
Yeah.
But this time he says, no, we're going to do a different way. I want you to go around and take a different route than you did last time, and then wait for me to move. And then think about that. Wait for me to move. I don't know what you're facing, what you're up against, but I think sometimes we take the most direct approach because we just want to fix it and be done with it and whatever. And what if God's saying, no, I want you to do this a different way. I want you to seek me for 30 days. I want you to, like, Robert, I think back to before we came back here from Odessa, God had moved in my heart and had just kind of showed me that, man, it was time to begin to look where God may be moving us. I wasn't necessarily looking to leave. Actually, I wasn't looking to leave. I didn't have a resume, nothing. And some things began to change. And so I started seeking God and like, God, what do you want to do? And so Julie and I, for 21 days, we didn't know what to do. We just like, all right, for the next 21 days, let's just seek God intentionally in prayer over this one thing. And just be very specific with this prayer. And we looked up and God answered that prayer. So instead of doing the what would have been normal advice of, well, just get your resume together and send it out to these different organizations that are hiring people and you just do the work. God said, no, I want you to just seek me for 21 days. And then within that 21 days, God answered our questions. He directed our path. He gave us the steps to take. He made it abundantly clear that he was moving us from there during that time. And in that time, it was one of those things of, I didn't see some of it coming, but it was one of those things because I was seeking God. It didn't surprise me. I was like, oh, okay. That's the way you're going to do this. All right. That's cool. But that being said, I don't know. I just think so often we live so much, and this is probably close to my heart right now because we're in this spiritual warfare series, is that we live so much in the physical that we try to solve all our physical problems in a physical way. Yet so often our physical problems have a root in the spiritual realm. And we're not going to find the solutions to our physical problem in the physical realm because it's only going to be found in the spiritual realm. That there's a bigger battle going on. And yet if we'll go to God just in the everyday business, man, in the everyday job, in the everyday relationship, marriage, kids, whatever it is, and begin to actually seek God on the things that actually matter in life. And I say that because I think I think so often people, we really seek God when we want our team to win, right? I don't think God cares what team wins on any sport field whatsoever any day of the week. Like but yet I've seen people seek God more over their sport team winning a game than they seek God of seeing their kid come to know Jesus or walk with Jesus until, you know what I'm saying? It's just like,
well, I'll tell you something I'm guilty of, and it's not just a sports team, right? So sometimes we seek God to get our way.
That's right.
Right. So the thing you brought up about Joshua was, he said, are you friend or foe? He says, neither, for I'm the commander of the Lord's army. Basically, hey, I don't like, I got a whole different thing going on, right?
I'm not here to fight your battle. You're here to either come along with me or
you're going to join me or you're not going to win. This is how this plays out, right?
Right.
And so I think that's what happens too. So sometimes at sports teams, sometimes we seek God because we want his thing, right? So like, for example, just to be real tangible, I had actually told the Lord on the way up on Friday that if the answer that we came to for the same answer we came to for the last 9 months was changed because this person had the power to change that answer, that I would be okay, that I wouldn't understand why. Make no mistake about it. And that answer actually, honestly, Chris, that answer is still in jeopardy. I have no idea if that's where it's going to land. But I told the Lord, I said, Lord, I'm good with that. I'm not seeking my will. I'm not seeking my best. I'm seeking your will and what you want. And then let me do that. Right. It makes me think of your 21 days. Was that what you said?
Yeah. 21 days.
Made me think of Hebrews 11, verse 6. And it talks about, and it is impossible to please God without faith. And anyone who wants to come to him must believe that God exists and that he rewards those who seek him sincerely.
I love that, man. That's good. Because that's really the essence of it. It's applying faith to every area of your life.
Yeah.
It's trusting that God's way is better.
Absolutely. And that actually, so Chris, it's almost like that's on your son.
Oh my gosh. I was trying to figure out what that noise was. And then I realized our dog is in his crate over here. And
okay. He's just moving around. He's
just moving around, guys. Sorry.
Yeah, that's all right. No, that's fine. Anyway, what you said made me think of the essentially Isaiah 55. I think is it 55? Let me make sure I'm right on that. Yeah, 55 verse 6. It says, "Seek the Lord while he may be found, call on him while he is near." And then I'm gonna skip to verse 8. It says, "For my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are my ways your ways," declares the Lord. I love this. "As the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than yours." And it goes through a whole bunch of stuff that frankly we don't understand, but he does, and it's just kind of a poem from that point on. And so I think he rewards those who seek him sincerely, because we like you were talking about earlier, sometimes we're seeking a physical solution to a spiritual problem.
Yeah. It makes me think, and we got to probably get to Landon pretty soon, but it makes me think a little bit about Jamie Winship, who was a former New York Police Department, worked in intelligence worldwide. But he had a discipline of asking God, all right, over cases, over situations, over wherever he was at the time in the world, he would ask God, all right, God, how would you do this? What do you want to do? Yep. And there's no blueprint for this in scriptures. Here's how you solve a case as a police officer. There's no blueprint, but there is a blueprint of how you get the answer is you seek God. So I say that because what if everybody did that? The nurses of the world, that when they go into a room and they ask God, will you help me see this the way you see this? Will you help me know what I need to know? And if there's how would you want to handle this?
How would you want me to do this?
If it's a businessman, all right, God, before I go into this, will you show me, what you want me to know about this business deal or this business situation before you handle an employee or a boss? Or, what if you started asking that question, believing that, hey, what if God had a way of doing something that maybe would not align with the way that you've always done things or the way that is business as usual. But what if you started doing it his way? And just like David, he gave you incredible success. I just think that it's something worth trying, man. You see it successful with David. Why would we not apply that to our own lives?
Yeah. Well, I'll land the plane first, then you can do your pithy, one line, Pastor.
Bro, I don't know if I've got it today, but go ahead.
You seem to always land it good. Like last week, I almost had to keep going on the podcast because I was like, no way, he just did that. Anyway, hey, here's the deal. I was in the Word, and I was spending time in the Old Testament. I have read that verse more times than I could have imagined. David sought the Lord. Should I chase after the raiders? And I've, for the entire time, thought that the logical conclusion to that is yes. Right. But the Lord could have said, no, I've got another way.
That's right.
You're going to get your people back, but it's not going to be the way that you think. Right. In the same way, when he went and fought the Philistines, first time's like, yep, God says, go defeat them traditionally. But the second time, he wants to make sure that they know that there is a spiritual battle in play. He wants David to know that he's going before him to fight for him, that his army is fighting for him. And then he's getting to join him in that, right? And then, so as I was sitting there and I was thinking to myself, as I'm driving up towards the Pentagon, up to the building, as I like to call it, as I'm driving up to the building, and I'm like, I don't really need to text everybody for help on this one. And God was like, yeah, just like David didn't need to ask me whether he needed to chase after the raiders. And I was like, all right, that's a good point. That's a good point. All right, Holy Spirit, we're gonna ask, right? We're gonna ask.
Right.
And the thing that was most fascinating is as I'm sitting there in the meeting, and it's a 45 minutes, which is a really long time for this one human. You don't get that much time typically. And God just kept bringing back that prayer request: favor, insight, wisdom. And I kept in my brain while he's talking and I'm listening and I'm trying to know where to put the wise words in. I'm like, favor, check. Insight, check. Wisdom. I need the wisdom. Like, help us see the wisdom. Now we got there, Chris. We got there, and it was because not me, but someone else at the table came with the wisdom. But I think that's the point. God wants us to seek him while he can be found. He wants us to do things different. You said there's not a blueprint to I'm going to sum it this way. There's not a blueprint to your profession, but there is a blueprint for being smarter or better at your profession, because that blueprint is seeking God. Lord, what do you want me to know right now? And, what do you want me to do about it? How do you want me to approach it? So I think that's kind of what God was teaching me this week. He definitely took a non-traditional route in a weird way.
That's cool.
How would you land the plane here?
So I would say this: while there may not be a blueprint for your profession, there is a blueprint in seeking his direction.
You did it again. Amen.